Listen, K-fam, the housekeeper called him a monster. The 5-year-old girl heard every word. Ayu, let me set the scene for you. Zuri Bennett, 29, Black American, grief counselor for domestic abuse survivors. Burgundy wrap dress, gold at her throat. She holds her daughter Ari in the East Wing library and watches a man cross the courtyard below. Co Hyun, 34, Korean Mafia boss of the CO syndicate. They call him the quiet one. Black shirt, sleeves rolled. A koi tattoo runs down the left side of his neck and disappears under his collar. 8 months of peace inside marble walls. 8 months since he took a bullet meant for the child. That night at dinner, Ari climbs onto his lap. She asks him to cut her steak. He does it in silence. His jaw trembles once. Omo. In Boston, a man in a black clerical shirt slides a baby photo across a table. He hands it to a mercenary in tactical gear. He orders the extraction. Han Do-yoon, chief of security, finds a contractor photographing the perimeter. Seo begins sleeping in a chair outside his daughter's door, gun on his knee. He tells the tutor at 4 in the morning, if they see me love her, they will drown her first. And then Zuri finds a christening certificate, a signature she was never supposed to see again. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Ari's small fingers were still wet from the fountain when she said the word out loud in the library. Monster. She said it careful, the way 5-year-olds test a new coin between their teeth. Then she looked up at Zuri to see if the coin was real. Zuri did not answer right away. She set the storybook down on the low reading table, spine open, and lowered herself to the rug so their eyes met on the same line. The burgundy midi dress spread around her knees. The thin gold necklace slid forward and touched the collarbone. Outside the tall east wing window, the mid-morning sun cut across the stone courtyard in one clean gold strip. Where did you hear that word, baby? Ari hugged the beige teddy bear tighter. Butter yellow cotton dress today, 2 curly space buns still a little damp on the tips. Miss Dawsom, what did Miss Dawsom say? The girl looked at the bear first, then at her mother. She said Papai is a monster. Zuri kept her face still. The trick was in the shoulders. If the shoulders dropped even half an inch, the child would read it as truth confirmed. She kept the shoulders up. And you, she said, do you think Papai is a monster? Ari thought about it. She thought about it the way she thought about which flavor of jelly went on which side of the bread. Serious, slow, all in. He has the fish on his neck, she said finally. The koi. The koi. She tried the Korean word, and it came out round and soft in her mouth. He said the fish swims up the waterfall. He said it's a fighter. That's right. Fighters aren't monsters. Zuri breathed out through her nose. No, baby, they aren't. The library was the East Wing's second heart. 2 stories of shelves, a rolling ladder with brass fittings, 1 long velvet reading bench under the window, and the low round rug where the Persian pattern was already worn thin from Ari's knees. Grace Whitfield had chosen the rug on her second day in the house. She said any room where a child was going to read needed a spot where the child could destroy the floor a little. Zuri picked up the storybook again. She did not open it. Baby, come here. Ari climbed into her lap without being asked twice. The bear came too. Zuri felt the weight of her 22 kilograms, warm through the cotton, 1 small heel pressed into her thigh, and for a second she let herself feel exactly how much she had to lose, and then she filed it away. Some people, she said, when they see something big, they get scared. And when people get scared, they use the biggest word they know. Monster is a big word. It's a big word. But he's not a monster. No, then why? Zuri opened her mouth and paused. Across the courtyard, the double doors of the south corridor opened, and Co Hyun stepped into the strip of sun. He was in the black Egyptian cotton shirt. Sleeves already rolled to the forearms, even though it was not yet noon. The old scars on the inside of the left arm caught the light in 3 thin lines. He was reading something off a folded page, brow flat, jaw set. Han Do-yoon walked half a step behind him, gloved hands behind the back, earpiece coiled at the right ear. They crossed the courtyard at Co's pace, which was the pace of a man who had never once in his life hurried for another human being. Ari saw him at the same moment Zuri did. Papai. Yes, baby. He looks tired. He did look tired. Zuri had not said it. Ari had said it. The koi tattoo rode up the left side of his neck as he turned his head to speak to Han. The ink caught the sun the way water catches it, not shining, but breathing. Zuri watched the small movement of his jaw. She had learned the jaw first. In 8 months in this house, she had learned that the jaw told the truth before the mouth remembered to lie. Are we going to say hi? Not now, baby. He's working. He's always working. I know. Ari settled her cheek against Zuri's collarbone. The bear settled with her. Down in the courtyard, Seo folded the page, slid it into his trouser pocket, and looked up. He looked up at the library window. Zuri did not move. Ari did not move. He held their eye for a beat and a half. He did not smile. He did not lift a hand. He simply looked. The way a man looks at the last light before he goes into a tunnel, and then he turned and walked into the south wing and was gone. Zuri exhaled. You can breathe now, baby. I was breathing. I know you were. She stroked the space between the two buns and the cotton was already dry. She thought about the housekeeper. Da Sam. 26. Been with the house 4 years, from before Ari, from before Zuri. Efficient, quiet, always polite. Zuri had never heard her say a word she was not supposed to say, which meant Da Sam had said it in Korean and someone had translated, and the someone was 5 years old and had been in the pantry for a cookie she was not supposed to have. Baby, where were you when Miss Da Sam said it? Behind the door. Which door? The kitchen one, the little door by the flower. And who was Miss Da Sam talking to? Miss Jaiwoo. And Miss Jaiwoo said what? Ari lifted her face. She said Sim. Zuri kept her voice flat. Sim, Sim, she said Sim. Papai is a monster. Sim. Zuri set the storybook down again. She did not want to be holding it. Baby, listen to me. Papai loves you. Papai chose you. You know that word chose. He chose me. He chose you. When? When you were 3, when the bad man in Boston tried to take you and Papai came and stood in front, and the bullet went in his shoulder. Yes, and that's why he does the ice on it. Yes. Ari nodded. The nodding was serious. He's not a monster. No, baby, Miss Da Sam is wrong. Miss Da Sam is scared. Of what? Of the same thing Zuri was scared of, but she did not say that. She said what she always said, which was the true thing at the smallest possible size, of loving him. Ari considered this. That's silly. Yes, you love him. Zuri froze for one clean beat and then she found her voice again. I take care of him. That's the same. Sometimes. Ari nodded and slid off her lap and went to the rolling ladder and dragged it 2 feet along the shelf and began climbing to the 3rd rung. She was not allowed on the 3rd rung. She climbed anyway. Zuri watched her and let her. Grace Whitfield came in through the side door with 2 mugs. She's on the 3rd rung again. I see her. Coffee, please. Grace set the mugs on the low table. Cream cardigan today, sage green blouse underneath, the long, thin gold chain with the small pearl swinging as she bent. She looked at Ari on the ladder, sighed the sigh of a woman who had raised 4 of her own before she ever came to raise somebody else's, and settled onto the reading bench. I heard about the pantry. Zuri looked at her. Already, Miss Jaiwoo came to me, crying. Did she confess? She confessed. Da Sam is packing. Did Seo? Han told him at 7 this morning. Zuri closed her eyes for 1 second. What did he say? He said pay her a year and put her on a plane and don't let her come back. Not more, not more. Zuri opened her eyes. Above them, Ari was singing something to the bear on the 3rd rung of the ladder in a mix of English and Korean that Zuri did not fully catch. That's mercy, Grace said. That's cost. What? He didn't want her dead. He wanted her gone. That means he already decided he cannot afford Ari to hear it a second time. Grace looked at her a long moment. You are getting good at reading him. I have to be. Zuri, don't. Grace stopped. She sipped her coffee. She looked out the window at the empty courtyard where Seo had crossed a minute before. 8 months, she said. I know how long it's been. 8 months since the shoulder. 8 months since he brought you 2 into this house and said the door was yours as long as you wanted it. I know, Grace. You still sleep with the go bag under the bed. Zuri did not answer that. She had not told Grace about the go bag. Grace had found it the way Grace found everything, by walking into a room with a broom and being quiet for a minute. The go bag lived under the west side of the bed, behind the winter blanket. 2 passports. $9,000 in cash in 3 currencies. a bottle of Ari's asthma inhaler, the photograph of Zuri's mother because Zuri could not leave a life without the photograph of her mother. She had packed it the second week in the house and had not unpacked it since. "He knows about the bag," Grace said quietly. Zuri turned. "What?" "He knows. He hasn't looked at it, but he knows." "How do you know?" "Because last month I saw him standing in the doorway of your bedroom when you were downstairs, and he looked at the west side of the bed, and then he closed the door and walked away like a man closing a coffin." Zuri set the coffee down. "Grace, I'm telling you because you're going to have to decide." "Decide what?" "Whether you keep the bag or you keep the man." "I keep the child." "That's not the choice I asked about." Zuri stood up. She walked to the window. Down in the courtyard, a groundskeeper was raking the gravel path CO, and Han had walked across. The gravel had already forgotten them. Zuri watched the rake and thought about the second week in the house, when she had unpacked exactly enough clothing to look like she was staying and no more. She thought about the third month, when Ari had first called CO Papai out loud in front of the staff at dinner, and how CO had not looked up from his plate for 11 full seconds, and then had said, "Eat your green beans," in a voice that was slightly too even. She thought about the 6th month, when she had caught herself reading a menu for the mansion garden reception and thinking of what wine paired with duck, and had gone upstairs and checked the go bag that same night. 8 months of peace. 8 months of borrowed peace. That was the phrase. She had said it to herself in the shower 2 mornings ago, and it had gone in like a splinter and stayed. "Mommy." Zuri turned. Ari was down from the ladder, standing beside the reading bench, teddy bear under one arm and one small hand held out. "Can I go find Papai?" "Baby, he's working. I want to give him a hug." "Now, now." Zuri looked at Grace. Grace looked back with the expression of a woman who had already decided years ago that saying no to certain small people about certain small things was a war not worth fighting. 10 minutes, Zuri said. Then we come back and finish the story. Deal. Ari held up her little hand. Zuri took it. Grace stayed with the mugs. They went out the library's side door and down the long east corridor. The mansion was quiet in the way only very expensive houses could be quiet, not empty, but tuned, a piano the moment before the pianist sits down. Portraits on the left wall. Old ones, not CO's. Some previous family whose name Zuri had never asked. CO had bought the estate turnkey the year before he took the bullet in Boston, and he had never bothered to change the portraits, which Zuri had first read as arrogance, and now read, more and more, as a man saving his energy for the only thing in the house he actually cared about. Ari's ballet flats made soft slaps on the marble. Baby, when you hug him, yes, don't ask him if he is a monster. I won't. Don't tell him what Miss Dawson said. I won't. Just the hug. Just the hug. They turned the corner into the south wing. Han Du-yoon was standing outside the study door, gloves on, earpiece live. He saw them and his mouth softened by exactly 1 millimeter, which for Han Du-yoon was a full smile. Little miss. Uncle Iron Hand. He is on a call. Zuri stopped. We can come back. No, Han said. For her, he ends the call. He knocked once and opened the door before there was an answer. He stepped aside. Ari let go of Zuri's hand and walked in. She did not run. She walked, teddy bear pressed to her chest with both arms, the way she walked into church. Zuri stayed at the threshold. CO was standing at the far window with a phone to his ear, back to the door, black shirt, sleeves rolled. He was speaking Korean, low, 3 quick sentences. He heard the door and turned his head halfway and saw Ari and said one more sentence into the phone and hung up without waiting for an answer on the other end. He turned all the way around. He saw the child. Something happened in his face that Zuri had learned to watch for and had learned never to name out loud. The jaw softened first, then the eyes, then last the shoulders, which dropped by half an inch, which on COT Hyun was the same as another man falling to his knees. Ari walked across the study rug and stopped 1 step away from him. She looked up. Papai. Ari, I want a hug. He knelt. He did not squat. He did not bend from the waist. He put 1 knee on the floor of his own study, the study where 21 grown men had over the last 3 years walked in and never walked out, and he opened his arms exactly wide enough for her small body. Ari walked into them. She put her cheek against the koi tattoo on his neck, and she did not say anything at all. CO closed his eyes. Zuri watched from the threshold, one hand on the doorframe, and she understood in that moment the thing she had been refusing to understand for 8 months. She understood it the way you understand that a bone is broken, not by seeing the bone, but by the way your body decides to stop pretending. She was not going to leave. The go bag was going to stay under the bed. It would stay under the bed the way a scar stays on a shoulder, a record of what had been true once and was not going to be true again. She was going to keep the child. She was going to keep the man. She was going to keep the house, and if the world came for any of it, she was going to have to learn a new word for what she was willing to do. Ari lifted her head. Papai? Yes. You look tired. His mouth did the thing where it almost smiled and remembered at the last second not to. I am a little tired. Do you want to hold the bear? He looked at the beige teddy bear that had been in every photograph of his daughter's life since before he had met her. He looked at the small hand offering it up. Yes. She put the bear in his hands. He took it as if it were something breakable, which for a man whose hands had done what his hands had done was not a small thing to watch. Now Papai has to work, Ari said. She was already stepping back. She was already reaching for Zuri's hand. Yes, but you keep the bear. Until when? Until dinner. Then I need him back for the story. Deal. She walked back to Zuri and took her hand and did not look back. Sio stayed on one knee with the teddy bear in his hands and did not stand up until the door closed. In the corridor, Han nodded once and did not follow. They walked back past the portraits of a family whose name Zuri had decided, this morning, she did not need to know. Halfway back to the library, Ari squeezed her hand. Mommy, yes, baby. I gave him the bear because his hands were sad. Zuri stopped walking. She looked down at her daughter. Butter yellow cotton, 2 curly space buns, dark brown eyes that on any other 5-year-old would have been just dark brown eyes. His hands were sad? When he was on the phone, before he saw me, his hands were sad. How do you know? They were closed too tight. Zuri crouched, right there in the corridor on the marble, in the middle of the walk back to the library. She crouched and she took her daughter's face in both hands very gently and she looked at her. Baby, yes, you are the most important thing in this house. I know. Do you? Yes. How do you know? Ari thought about it. She thought about it the way she thought about everything worth thinking about. Because Papai's shoulder has a hole and he keeps the ice on it and he never once said the hole hurts. Zuri kissed her forehead. She stood up and they walked together the last stretch to the library. Grace was still on the reading bench. The coffee was still hot. The storybook was still open on the low table. Down in the courtyard, the groundskeeper had finished with the gravel and moved on to the roses. Zuri sat down and put her daughter in her lap and picked up the storybook and did not open it yet. She looked at the tall east wing window and at the strip of sun on the stone courtyard, empty now, and she thought very quietly, in the smallest voice she had, that 8 months of borrowed peace was not the phrase after all. 8 months of borrowed peace was what a woman said to herself when she was still packing. She was not packing anymore, which meant the peace was not borrowed, which meant she understood with a cold, clean clarity that started in her collarbone and traveled down to her fingertips, that when they came for it, and she was Marchetti's daughter-in-law, and she knew, without ever having said the name to Sio, that they were going to come for it. She was going to be here when they arrived. She opened the storybook. Where were we, baby? The part where the fox meets the crane. That's right. She began to read. Her voice was steady. Outside the window, in a study across the courtyard she could not see from here, a Korean man in a black shirt was standing at his desk with a beige teddy bear in his hands, and he had not yet put it down. He put the bear down eventually. Not on the desk. On the leather armchair by the window, sitting up, back against the cushion, so the black button eyes faced the courtyard. Then he sat behind the desk and picked up the phone again and finished the call in Korean he had cut when Ari walked in. The call lasted 4 minutes. He listened more than he spoke. When he hung up, he wrote 3 lines on a sheet of cream paper, folded it once, and pushed it under the desk blotter. He did that thing with his shoulder, the small rotation, the one he did when the old bullet channel started to burn under the ice. Then he stopped doing it, because he had told himself years ago that the shoulder was a private matter, and even the room was not allowed to see it. Han Do-yoon came in without knocking. Han never knocked. He stood 2 steps inside the door, gloves on, hands folded behind his back, earpiece coiled behind his right ear like a small black snake. The housekeeper is on the plane, Han said in English. He always used English when the subject was staff. Manila. She will land at 9 our time. The wire cleared her account before she boarded. Seo nodded once. And the perimeter? Han's face did that thing where nothing moved, and yet the temperature in the room adjusted itself. A man with a camera on the ridge above the north wall, 22 minutes ago. Long lens. He photographed the east wing 3 times, the courtyard fountain twice, and the roofline of the south wing once. He left in a gray sedan, plates covered with dirt in a pattern that was deliberate. Seo set the pen down. The pen was heavy, a black lacquer thing his grandfather had used, and it made a small sound on the wood that was louder than the whole room. Was he alone? There was a second man in the sedan, driver, not looking at the house, looking at the road behind them. Trained, contractor. That is my read. Seo let a beat sit. He looked at the bear across the room. The bear looked at the courtyard. The koi tattoo on his neck moved once as he swallowed. Do not raise the head count on the walls tonight, he said. Not one man more than yesterday. If they are watching, they are counting. Understood. Double the men inside the house. Rotate them through the kitchen entrance. Make it look like a delivery schedule. Understood. And Han's chin lifted a millimeter. The child eats dinner at 7. She will want the chair beside mine. Let her sit there. Do not move the chair. Han said nothing that was audible, but he tilted his head once toward the armchair with the bear on it, and Seo understood that Han had already seen the bear and had already understood everything the bear meant, and that Han was not going to say a single word about it now or ever. Han left. Seo sat still for a long minute. Then he opened the top drawer on the right side of the desk. Inside was a shoulder holster, worn soft at the strap. He did not pick it up. He looked at it the way a man looks at a coat he used to wear in a colder country. Then he closed the drawer. Across the courtyard, the second-floor library window caught a rectangle of afternoon sun. He could not see Zuri from where he sat. He knew she was there anyway. At 6:30, the dining room began to be prepared. It was a room the previous owners had built for showing off. A long walnut table under a chandelier of hand-cut bohemian crystal, 10 chairs on each side, and 2 carvers at the ends. Seo had kept the room and stripped its use down to 3 plates, 3 chairs at the head, and 1 small stack of children's flatware in a velvet-lined drawer nobody but Grace ever opened. On formal evenings, Seo took the head. Zuri sat to his left. Ari sat to his right. The other 20 chairs stayed empty because Seo believed that empty chairs at a table taught a child that space could be held and hunger could wait, and no one had to fill every seat to feel full. At 6:55, Grace brought Ari down. Ari had changed, not because she was told to, because she had opinions. She was in the mint green cotton dress now, with the small cardigan buttoned only at the top button, and the knee-high lace socks slightly slouched at the ankles the way she always let them fall by the end of the day. Her double curly space buns were still up, but one of them had lost a little tension and was leaning a fraction to the left, and she was not the kind of child who cared. The teddy bear was not with her, because the teddy bear was in the study, because that had been the arrangement. Zuri was already at the table in the burgundy midi wrap. She had washed her hands 3 times between the library and the dining room, and she did not know that about herself, but Grace had noticed. Seo came in last. He entered from the study corridor, still in the black Egyptian cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to the forearms, still barefoot on the marble because he preferred the floor to know him, and he sat at the head with the same small nod he gave every meal, the nod that was in place of a prayer he had stopped saying at 19. The plates came out. Seared ribeye for the adults, a smaller cut for Ari, roasted vegetables, a bowl of Korean side dishes Ari had learned to like faster than her mother had. Zuri picked up her fork. Seo picked up his. The house cook, a Filipino woman named Marisol who had been with Seo 6 years, set Ari's plate down and stepped back 3 careful paces and stayed there because Ari sometimes had questions. Ari sat in her chair. Ari looked at her steak. Ari looked at her tiny knife. Ari looked at Seo. Then Ari, without asking permission from anyone, slid off her chair, walked around the corner of the walnut table, and climbed up onto Seo's lap. She did it the way she did everything, with the absolute confidence of a child who had never been told no by the person she was climbing on. The room stopped. Marisol froze. She had known Seo 6 years. She had watched him eat every dinner in this house alone, then with Zuri and Ari at a respectful distance. She had never once seen a child in his lap at this table. Zuri set her fork down without a sound. Her hand went to the base of her throat where the gold chain sat, and it stayed there, resting on the thin metal, and she did not know she had done it. Seo did not move his arms. His hands stayed exactly where they had been on the table, one on the linen napkin, one flat beside his water glass. He was looking at Ari the way a man looks at a bomb he has not decided is a bomb. Ari picked up his hand, the right one, the heavy one with the white gold signet ring. She wrapped both of her small hands around his fingers, and she pushed the whole apparatus, hand and ring and all, toward her plate. "Papai," she said, in that mix of Portuguese and English she had built for herself out of everyone in the house at once. "Cut for me. The knife is too big for my hand." The jaw, it happened once. A tremor along the left mandible, a single beat, gone as fast as it came. Nobody caught it who did not already know the man. Zuri caught it. Grace, at the sideboard pouring water, caught it. Marisol, watching from 3 paces back, did not, because she was watching the wrong side of his face. Seo did not speak. He shifted the ribeye toward himself with 2 fingers. He picked up the tiny child's knife from the velvet drawer because Grace had set it there without being asked. He cut the meat into 6 pieces. He cut them small. He cut them the way a chef cuts for someone whose milk teeth are not all in yet. He did it without looking at Ari, and without looking at Zuri, and without letting his shoulders move at all. When he finished, he set the knife down. Ari picked up her fork and began to eat off her plate while still sitting on his lap. Nobody at the table said a single word. Zuri picked her fork back up eventually. Her hand shook once on the way to the plate, and she stilled it with the other hand, and then she ate because eating was a job you could give your body when your body did not know where to put itself. Seo lifted his water glass with his left hand because his right hand was now busy being the arm around Ari's back, holding her steady on his lap so she would not tip when she leaned forward to reach the salt. His right arm had settled there without his permission. It had put itself around her the way a wall puts itself around a garden. He drank the water in 3 swallows and set the glass down and looked, for the first time since Ari had climbed up, at Zuri. Zuri met his eyes across 3 feet of walnut. She had spent 8 months learning not to read this man in public. She read him now. His face was still stone, but the stone had a crack running through it, a thin bright line, and she saw the line, and she saw that he knew she saw it. He looked away first. Ari, chewing, said, "You didn't eat, Papai." Seo picked up his fork. He speared a piece of the meat he had cut for her and put it in his own mouth, and he chewed it once and swallowed it, and it was the only piece of steak he ate the whole evening. Marisol brought dessert. She brought it without being asked. She brought the small ceramic pot of milk pudding Ari liked and a spoon for it, and she set it down on Seo's side of the table, not Ari's, and she backed away again without a word. Marisol had been in this house 6 years. She had learned a new rule tonight. She was not going to unlearn it. Ari ate the pudding off Seo's lap. When she was done, she wiped her mouth on his sleeve. She wiped her mouth on the black Egyptian cotton sleeve that had cost more than 3 months of Marisol's salary, and Seo let her, and the sleeve went dark where her mouth had been. Grace, at the sideboard, turned her face toward the window, because if she stayed facing the table 1 more second, she was going to cry in front of the boss of the Seo syndicate, and Grace Whitfield did not cry in rooms she was working in. Ari slid off his lap eventually, the way she had climbed on, without asking. She walked around the table to Zuri. She put her small, warm hand on Zuri's cheek. She said, "Mammy, Papai's shoulder is quiet tonight. I checked." Then she trotted out of the dining room in the direction of Grace because bath time was next and Ari had a system. Grace took her hand and walked her out. Zuri and Seo stayed at the table. Neither one of them spoke for a full minute. The chandelier above them clicked once in the way old crystal clicks when the temperature in a room shifts by a degree. Then Seo said, without looking up from his plate, "She has never done that before." "No," Zuri said. "She has not. Was it something you told her to do?" "No." He nodded once, just once. Then he stood. He set his napkin beside the plate, folded, corners aligned, the way a man folds a napkin when the alternative is putting his hand somewhere that would give him away. "Do not walk in the east corridor tonight after 10, he said. Zuri's chin lifted a fraction. Why? He was already at the door. He stopped there without turning around. There are men on the walls I do not know yet. Then he was gone, and Zuri was alone at a table set for 3 under a chandelier for 20, and she understood 2 things at once. The first was that Ari had, in 3 minutes and 1 small hand around a large hand, done what Zuri had not been able to do in 8 months, which was crack the man open in daylight in a room with witnesses. The second was that the men on the walls he did not know yet meant that Marchetti had already started moving, and Co did not yet know the name to put to the moving, and Zuri did. She sat there another minute. Then she stood up and walked to the study, because she had a christening certificate hidden in the lining of a hat box on the top shelf of her closet, and she was going to have to decide, before 10 o'clock tonight, whether to take it out. 214 miles north, in a back room above a shuttered Italian bakery in the north end of Boston, a man in a long black wool coat was pouring espresso from a battered stovetop pot into 2 small cups. His hair was silver, combed straight back with something oiled and old-fashioned. His round, rimless glasses caught the light of the single overhead bulb. The rosary on his left wrist was black leather, wrapped twice, worn smooth from being turned in the dark. On the ring finger of his right hand, a heavy silver signet with a saint engraved on its face and a scratch across the saint's eyes, he had put there himself the day the church struck his name from the roll. He set one of the cups in front of the man sitting across the table. Vincent Callahan did not touch the cup. He was in a canvas jacket over a black Henley, the shamrock tattoo on the inside of his left forearm just visible where the sleeve was rolled once. His pale green eyes were on the man in the coat, unblinking, patient in the way a hammer is patient. Marchetti sat. He took a long, slow sip of his own coffee. He set the cup down carefully in the exact center of its saucer, aligning the handle to the 4 o'clock position. Then he reached into the inside pocket of the coat and took out a small manila envelope, unmarked, sealed once with a piece of red string tied in a bow, the way a priest might tie a rosary pouch. He undid the string. He slid out a single photograph. It was a printed photo, 4 by 6, the corners slightly bent. He turned it around and pushed it across the table with 2 fingers until it was in front of Vincent. The photograph was of a child, a little girl of about 3 in a hospital bed, a small pink cast on her right arm, dark curls messy against a white pillow, holding a beige teddy bear against her cheek. Her eyes were half closed against a flash. Someone had loved her enough to take the picture. Somebody else had loved her enough to give it away. Ari Bennett, Marchetti said. His voice was soft, cultured, the voice of a man who had preached at weddings before he had preached at the wrong altar. 5 years old now, she lives in a house in the Hudson Valley. She has a tutor. She has a mother. She has a Korean gentleman who calls himself her father, though there is no paper to that effect. Vincent looked at the photograph. He did not pick it up. She has asthma, Marchetti said, and a beige bear she calls Bear, and she is home every night by 7. She is out of the house between 9 and 11 on Wednesdays for a piano lesson in a private studio in the village of Rhinebeck, but her security posture is heaviest during those 2 hours because the gentleman is a superstitious man. The best window is the house itself. Vincent finally moved. He picked up the espresso and drank it in one motion and set the cup down. Extraction or removal? Extraction, Marchetti said, his fingers tightened just slightly on the base of his own cup. Alive, delivered to me here, nothing on her body damaged. The mother? Immaterial. Do what you must to reach the child. If she is between you and the child, she is between you and the child. The gentleman. Marchetti's mouth did the thing that in another man would have been a smile. The gentleman, he said, buried a bullet in his shoulder to save this little girl 2 years ago. He is under the impression that he is her father. I am going to correct that impression, and I am going to do it with her alive in a room with me, and I want him to know it before he dies. Vincent picked the photograph up now. He looked at it for a long 5 seconds. Then he set it back down, face up, in the middle of the table. The house is a mansion, he said. 20+ staff, private security. I need 6 men, 3 vehicles, night entry through a service window on the east side of the wing where the child sleeps. 24 hours to set the walk, 48 to execute. You have 48, Marchetti said. Not 1 hour more. She is beginning to be seen in that house in ways she was not seen a week ago. The window is closing. Vincent stood. Marchetti did not stand. He picked up the photograph again with 2 fingers and looked at the little girl's face under the lamp for what was, by anyone's clock, a long time. His ice-blue eyes did not blink behind the rimless glasses. "My granddaughter," he said, mostly to himself, though Vincent was still in the room. "My son's child, my blood, and they put her in a house with a Korean butcher and a widow who wears burgundy to breakfast." He set the photograph down. "Bring her to me by Thursday night, Mr. Callahan, before the Korean gentleman learns that I have been dead for 6 years incorrectly." Vincent left through the back stairs. Marchetti sat with the photograph and the espresso and the single overhead bulb for another 20 minutes. Then he lifted the rosary off his wrist, kissed the small silver crucifix at its end, put it in his pocket, and stood. He turned off the light on his way out. In the Hudson Valley, Zuri opened the door to CO's study without knocking, because knocking would have given her time to lose her nerve. The bear was still on the leather armchair, still facing the courtyard, still holding its position in the empty room. She stood there in the dark for a moment. Then she went upstairs, because she had a hat box to open. The hat box was heavier than a hat box should be. Zuri set it on the closet bench and pulled the lid straight up so the silk lining would not tear. Under the folded tissue paper there was a second layer, and under the second layer there was a flat manila envelope she had not opened in 6 years. She lifted it out with both hands. She did not open it yet. She sat on the bench with the envelope on her knees and listened to the house. Water still running in the bathroom 2 doors down. Ari laughing at something Grace said. A low voice in the corridor below, a man's voice, short syllables in Korean, and then quiet again. The house sounded normal. It was not normal. She slid the envelope back under the tissue, closed the lid, and left the hat box on the closet bench instead of on the shelf. Tonight, she wanted it near the door. Tonight, she wanted every important thing near the door. Downstairs, in the south wing, CO was not in his study. The bear was still on the leather armchair facing the courtyard. The chair by the desk was empty. The lamp was on. The 3 lines under the blotter had not been touched. Han Du-yoon crossed the marble corridor in gloves and stopped at the corner where the east wing began, and there he stood, because there he had been told to stand. At 11 minutes past 10, Han spoke into his sleeve. He listened for 4 seconds. Then he walked the length of the east corridor once with his hand a fraction from his holster, and when he came back he did not walk back. He stayed. That was the change. Until tonight Han rotated. Tonight Han rooted. CO was in the security room off the kitchen when Han came in. 2 monitors, 1 desk, 1 steel chair, no coffee. CO was watching the feed from the north wall. The frame Han had shown him earlier played again. The contractor on the ridge, the long lens, the gray sedan. "Play the next hour," CO said. Han played the next hour. Nothing on the ridge. Then at 19:04 a delivery van slowed on the county road and did not turn in. It slowed enough to be counted. It kept going. "Again," CO said. Han played it again. The van slowed. A man in the passenger seat lifted a phone to the window, held it for 4 seconds, put it down. The van kept going. "That is the second team," CO said. Han said, "Yes, so there are 2, at least." CO stood up. His shoulder rolled once, the old one, the one that had taken the bullet in Boston. He put his hand flat against the wall to feel the wall, cold plaster. Real. Then he walked out of the security room and down the corridor to the east wing without a word, and Han followed 3 steps behind him, because there were things Han would not let him do alone in this house tonight, even if the boss did not know he was not alone. Ari's bedroom door was cracked. Warm yellow light on the strip of carpet. Zuri's voice inside, low, reading. CO stopped at the door frame and did not go in. He looked at the strip of light on the carpet as though he were reading it too. Then he stepped back, 3 steps back, until he was standing across the corridor with his shoulder blades against the opposite wall. Han watched him. CO said in Korean, "Bring me a chair." Han said in Korean, "Which chair?" CO said, "The one from my study, the one with the arms." Han went. When he came back, he was carrying the leather armchair from the study, and on the seat of the armchair was the beige bear, and on top of the bear was a pistol in a holster of oiled leather. Han set the armchair down against the wall opposite Ari's door. CO picked up the bear and held it in one hand a second, feeling it like a father feels a child's weight when he first picks the child up asleep. Then he set the bear on the corridor floor beside the chair, took the holster off the seat, sat down, and laid the pistol across his knee. He did not put it in the holster. He kept the grip in his right palm, the muzzle across his left thigh, the safety off, his index finger straight along the frame the way a man is taught. He leaned his head back against the wall. He did not close his eyes. Han stood in front of him a moment. He looked at the chair. He looked at the bear on the floor. He looked at the door across the corridor. Boss, no. Boss, let me put men here, too, rotating. No, you will not sleep. I will sleep enough. Han said nothing for a beat. Then he said in Korean, so quiet it barely crossed the corridor, if Miss Bennett comes out and sees you. Seo said, she will not come out. She is reading. When she is finished, she will kiss the child and go to her own room. She always does. And if the child comes out. Seo looked at the door. He did not answer that one. Han left him. When Han's steps had turned the corner, Seo shifted the gun on his knee an inch to the left so that the muzzle pointed at the wainscoting instead of at the door. He kept it there. He kept his hand around the grip. He kept his eyes on the crack of yellow light. Inside the bedroom, Zuri closed the book. Ari was already asleep with her cheek on the bear's ear, which was odd because the bear was not in the room, which meant Ari was already dreaming with the bear the way she dreamed with the bear when the bear was somewhere else. Zuri sat on the edge of the bed a full minute longer than she needed to. Then she stood, kissed her daughter twice, once on the crown of the head and once on the small hand that was still open on the pillow, and walked out of the room. She stepped into the corridor and she saw him. She stopped in the doorway. The knob was still in her hand. The strip of yellow light fell across her burgundy dress. She looked at the chair against the far wall and the man in the chair and the gun on his knee and the bear on the floor. Seo looked back at her. Neither of them spoke for 4 seconds. She let go of the knob. She pulled the door until it was cracked exactly as it had been. Then she walked to him. She walked slowly. She stopped in front of the chair, her toes 6 inches from his boot. Hyun, go to your room. Not yet. He did not move the gun. He did not raise his eyes above her collarbone. She saw the line of his jaw and the vein at his temple that only appeared when he had not slept. How long, she said. Tonight, every night. Until I say, that is not an answer. His eyes came up. They stayed on hers. Go to your room, Zuri. She stood there. He waited. She turned, slow, and walked back to the bedroom door. She stopped there and put her palm flat on the wood. There is something I need to tell you. Not tonight. Tomorrow morning, in the study. Bring what you have. She looked back at him one time. She went into her own room and shut the door and stood with her back against it for a long time. On the other side of the wall, a man was sitting in a chair with a pistol on his knee, and she could feel the chair through the plaster the way you feel a heater through a wall. Down the corridor, Grace came out of the bathroom drying her hands on a linen towel and saw the chair, and the man, and the gun, and the bear. She stopped. She looked at the tableau a long moment, the way a woman who has raised other people's children stops in a doorway and takes inventory. Then she folded the towel over her arm and walked away. She did not go to bed. She went to the kitchen. Han was in the kitchen. Marisol was in the kitchen. 2 of the disguised guards were in the kitchen, drinking water out of paper cups, which is a small thing, a man drinking out of a paper cup instead of a glass, but it meant they were not staying long enough to wash a glass. Grace saw the paper cups. Grace said nothing. Grace put on a kettle. Upstairs, the man in the chair kept his index finger along the frame of the pistol, and time passed. At 3 minutes to 4 in the morning, Grace came up the back stairs with a mug in each hand. Chamomile, no sugar. She came around the corner into the east corridor, and there he was, still, exactly as he had been, only his head had tilted a 1/4 inch toward the door, as though he had been listening for a sound that had not come. She walked to him and she stopped 4 feet away, because a woman does not walk up on an armed man in a dark corridor at 4 in the morning without stopping first. Mr. Seo. He looked at her. He put the safety on. He set the pistol on the arm of the chair. She held out one of the mugs. He looked at the mug. He looked at her. He took it. His hand went around it and stayed around it, and she saw the moment he registered the heat and did not let go. May I sit? He did not answer. He moved the bear from the floor onto his own left knee and made room on the floor next to the chair for a small footstool that was not there. Grace understood. She sat down on the floor beside the chair with her back against the wall, her legs folded under her cream cardigan, both hands around her own mug. They drank. After a while she said, "You have been in this chair since 10. I have been in this chair since 10. You will still be in this chair at 7. Yes, and tomorrow night? Yes, and Thursday." He looked at her. She had said the day. She had not been told the day. He did not ask her how she knew. Grace had raised a child of a diplomat in Nairobi during a coup. Grace knew the way a house tilts. "Mr. CO, Grace, may I say something you will not like? You may say it." She turned the mug in her hands. She looked at the door across the corridor. "That child in there loves you." He did not react. "She loves you the way children love the parent who was there. She does not know the word for what you do. She does not know your work. She knows your neck. She knows your hand cutting her food. She knows the sound your shoulder makes when you pretend it does not." He did not react. "You can sit in this chair every night until she is grown," Grace said, "and it will not be enough because you are trying to protect her without letting her know you are protecting her. And a child knows anyway. She always knows anyway. You are not saving her from anything by pretending." She turned her head and looked at him. "Let her see you love her." The pistol on the arm of the chair caught a stripe of light from the sconce down the corridor. He looked at the pistol. He looked at the door. He set the mug down on the floor beside the bear. "Grace, yes, if they see me love her." He stopped. He rolled the shoulder, the old one. He tried again. "If they see me love her, they will drown her first." He said it in English, and he said it evenly, and he did not look at her when he said it. He said it the way a man reads out a line from a report. Grace felt the sentence in her chest for a full second before her face caught up with it. "Who are they?" "The men who took my father when I was 7. The men who took my brother when I was 19. The men who put a bullet in me when she was 3. The men who are on the road tonight in a van that slows and does not turn in. Everyone. Grace, everyone." Grace did not answer for a long time. She looked at her mug. She looked at the bear on his knee. She looked at the small stripe of light under the bedroom door where a child was asleep with her cheek on an ear that was not there. "So you sit outside her door with a gun?" "Yes, and you do not let her feel you love her." "No, and you think that is the shield." "Yes." She nodded slowly. She lifted the mug and she drank the last of the chamomile. She set the mug down beside his. Then she stood, brushed her cardigan straight, and looked down at him in the chair. "Mr. CO, yes. The men who took your father, the men who took your brother, the men who shot you, did any of them wait for permission from your face before they decided you loved someone?" He looked up at her. "No, no," she said. "They already knew, they always know. The face does not fool them, only the child." She left him. She walked back down the corridor with both empty mugs and did not turn back. When she reached the top of the back stairs, she stopped, one hand on the banister, and she pressed her forehead against the wall for a beat, and then she went down. He sat in the chair. He did not move for a long time. Then he shifted the bear off his knee and put it back on the floor at the base of the chair, and he picked up the pistol, and he put it back across his thigh, and he looked at the door. Under the door, the strip of yellow light had gone dark an hour ago. He knew the shape of the room behind the door without seeing it. The bed. The nightlight shaped like a small paper moon. The chair with the cardigan folded over the back. The window facing the courtyard. The window facing the east lawn. The window with the service latch that a maintenance man had oiled 2 months ago, and that opened, if you knew how, without a sound. He thought about that window a long time. At 5 he stood. He walked to the door. He put his palm flat against the wood and he held it there, and he closed his eyes for 4 seconds, and he took his hand off the wood without a print. He went back to the chair. He sat down. He did not sleep. In her own room, Zuri was awake. She had been awake since Grace's steps had passed her door at 4. She had heard the chair through the plaster. She had heard the mug set down on tile. She had heard the sentence. She had not heard the words, but she had heard the shape of the sentence. The way a woman in a house learns to hear the shape of the sentences on the other side of walls when there is a child in the house and a man with a gun in the corridor. At 6, she got out of bed. She put on the robe. She went to the closet and she took the manila envelope out of the hat box on the bench and she put the envelope inside the robe against her ribs. She stood at the closet door another minute. Then she went to the bathroom and she washed her face and she brushed her teeth and she came out and she stood at her bedroom door with her hand on the knob. She waited until she heard hand steps at the corner. She opened the door. The corridor was empty. The chair was gone. The bear was gone. The gun was gone. Only a small square of warmth on the carpet in front of the door where a man had been sitting for 8 hours. She stepped into the corridor and she looked at the square of warmth on the carpet a long moment, and then she walked toward the south wing because he had said morning, and morning was now, and she had a name in an envelope against her ribs that a man in a chair with a gun did not yet know. Down at the south corner, Han was standing where he had been standing for 2 hours. He looked at her. He looked at her hand pressed flat against her side over the envelope. He did not stop her. He said, in his careful English, "He is waiting for you." He opened the door of the study. She went in. The bear was on the leather armchair by the window, exactly where it had been yesterday. The lamp was on. The 3 lines under the blotter had been added to. There were now 4. Seo was standing behind the desk. He had changed his shirt. Same black cotton, sleeves rolled, top 2 buttons open. The koi on his neck was clear in the lamplight. He looked at her hand at her ribs. "Sit." She sat. He set a small cup of coffee in front of her. He set one for himself. He put both palms flat on the desk between them. "Show me." She reached into the robe. She took the envelope out. She set it flat on the desk between his hands. "Before you open it," she said. He looked up. "I have known this man's face longer than I have known yours." He did not touch the envelope. He waited. Down at the road, a delivery van slowed and did not turn in. Seo lifted his eyes from the envelope to her face and let them stay there. Zuri did not look away. The coffee between them steamed against the cold glass of the desk. Somewhere below, a delivery van slowed on the county road and did not turn in, and neither of them heard it. "His face," Seo said, not a question, a test of the sentence she had just handed him. "His face," Zuri answered. He put the flat of his hand on the manila and pushed it 2 inches closer to himself. He did not open it. He read her wrist first, the small tremor in the tendon, the way she had folded the cuff of the robe over the knuckle. Then he read the envelope. The paper had a coffee ring on the lower left corner. Old, years old. It had lived in a hat box longer than Ari had been alive. "Sit," he said again, though she was already sitting. She sat straighter. "Name," he said. She had rehearsed this sentence in the shower 2 nights ago, and again in the closet 40 minutes ago, and again on the stairs. Every rehearsal had been softer than the one before it. Now she said it flat. "Elias Marchetti, my father-in-law." He held his breath for 1 beat, only 1. He rotated the coffee cup a quarter turn so the handle pointed at his right hand and did not drink. "Your husband's father." "Yes." "Who is dead?" "Officially, 6 years. But not." "Not." He nodded once, the way a man nods at a diagnosis he already suspected. He slid a finger under the flap of the envelope. The seal was old wax and cracked without protest. He took out 1 sheet. Cream paper, gilt border, a saint at the top in embossed ink, a cross below. A christening certificate for a boy named Daniel Marchetti, dated 43 years ago in a parish in the north end of Boston, signed in a slanted hand at the bottom. Father E. Marchetti, efficient. Seo read the signature twice. He read the parish name. He read the child's name, and Zuri watched his eyes stop for a full second on the surname, and she knew he had done the arithmetic before she opened her mouth. "Your husband," he said. "Daniel. Daniel Marchetti." "Yes." The father baptized the son. "Yes, in their own church. He was a priest for 31 years, excommunicated the year before Daniel died." Excommunicated for what? She did not want to answer that yet. She answered anyway. A woman in the parish. There were more than one. And there was money the church could not find. And the son. The son grew up in that house and inherited that face. Seo turned the paper over. The back was blank except for a faint pencil notation, 3 digits and a letter, an archive code from a DOC's. He looked at the code. Zuri had not seen the code before either. He set the certificate down beside the envelope, flat, aligned with the edge of the blotter, like a piece of evidence at a table he had sat at before in another life. "You said you have known his face longer than mine. 8 years longer. When did you last see it?" 6 years and 4 months ago, at the funeral of my husband. Closed casket because the car burned. Elias stood on the church steps in the wool coat you have not seen yet and told me my son would be raised by his family, not mine. Sio's jaw moved once on the left side. Zuri had seen that move at the dinner table the night before when Ari climbed into his lap. She recognized it now the way you recognize the sound of your own child crying from another floor. Your son, he said. Ari is Daniel's child. Ari is my child. By blood. By blood, yes. He knows this. He has always known this. He was at the hospital the day she was born. He held her in the nursery before I did. I was still under anesthesia. When I woke up, he was in a chair by the bed and he had already named her in his head. He said the name to me, Ariana. I chose Ari the next morning to take it back. Sio did not move his hands. He kept them on the desk, palms down, thumbs a finger width from the edge of the paper. After Daniel died, he said, he came for her, court first, grandfather's rights. He lost because Daniel and I had signed papers before the wedding that he never knew about, then he came for her the other way. How? A woman he paid pretended to be a social worker. She got into the daycare on a Tuesday. Ari was 11 months old. She was in the sandbox. The woman put her in a baby Björn and walked toward the parking lot. The teacher noticed the Björn was on backward. Ari does not remember any of this. I remember the Björn. Sio closed his eyes for one beat and opened them. Then he pretended to die. A parish in Rome, a fire, a body they never verified because the diocese did not want the trial. The church wanted him gone and I wanted him gone, and for 4 years I let myself believe. You did not tell me his name in 8 months because. She had rehearsed this answer too. It came out worse than the rehearsal. Because the day I told you his name would be the day you would go to Boston to kill him. And I did not want Ari to grow up in a house where the man who cut her steak had left the table to become what her grandfather said he already was. He absorbed the sentence without reaction. He turned it once in his mouth like a coin and set it aside. You were wrong about that day, he said. I know. He came first. He came first. Yesterday, maybe the day before. The contractor with the lens on the North Ridge was his. You know this. I know his patience. He wanted a photograph before he wanted a body. He wanted to be sure the child in this house is the child he baptized in his head 6 years ago. Sio set his palm on the certificate and slid it back into the envelope. He did not fold the flap. He left it open, the way you leave a wound open so it can be looked at again. He is coming for her tonight, he said. Zuri had waited for that sentence, and it still landed inside her ribs sideways. Tonight. How do you know? Because a delivery van slowed on the road 2 minutes ago and did not turn in. It has done that at 1904 yesterday, at 200 hours last night, and now at 6:32. 3 passes in 11 hours. That is not a walk, that is a rehearsal, and a rehearsal that begins in daylight ends in the dark. Zuri reached for the coffee for something to do with her hand and did not drink it. Grace knew last night, she said. She told you it was Thursday. She read the house. How? The kitchen, paper cups, Marisol working past midnight. A tutor does not need to be told a schedule to know a schedule. And the leak. He looked at her. There is one. Jaiwoo. He shook his head 1 degree. Jaiwoo cried in the pantry. A woman who cries in the pantry is not the leak. The leak is the man who does not cry. She did not ask who. He did not offer. Taehyun. He stopped. It was the 2nd time in his life she had said the name that way, and both times she had used it as a hand on the arm, not as a summons. He waited. What do you need from me? He rotated the cup a quarter turn back. He looked at the envelope. He looked past her to the window that showed the courtyard, the fountain, the koi. Stay in the room with her until I come for you. Which room? Yours, not hers. Not hers. Yours has the door with the plate on the inside. Hers has the window with the latch that has been oiled since April. He will come through her window. He will not find her. She heard the sentence and set her cup down. April. The maintenance man who serviced the East Wing radiators in April was not from the county. He filed his own invoice. I paid it. He came back in September to check a leak I had not reported. I let him. I wanted to know the shape of him. He oiled the latch on Ari's window that day. I have known about the latch for 4 months. You have known, I have known, and you did not close it. I did not close it because a closed latch is a closed door. An oiled latch is a road. I would rather they walk a road I have watched than build a road I have not seen. Zuri put her hand flat on the desk beside his. She did not touch him. You have been waiting. I have been waiting. For him, for someone, he arrived. How long has the chair been outside her door? Since I saw the delivery van at 1904 yesterday. Before that, the chair was in me. She let that stay in the air. She did not touch it. T. Hyun, if he comes through her window and she is not there, he will look for her in the room he cannot enter. Mine, yours, with me in it, with you in it, and a door with a plate, and a woman on the inside who knows his face. She understood. She sat with it. You want him to see me. I want him to see nothing until Han opens the door and takes his hand off the gun. But if he sees anyone in that room, I would rather it be the face that has already refused him once. I refused him at a funeral. You refused him at a nursery. That is the one he remembers. She held the edge of the desk with the tips of 2 fingers. And Ari, she said, Ari will be with me. Where? He looked at the study around him, the desk, the reading lamp, the koi in the courtyard fountain, the poltrona where the bear sat propped against the arm, one paw up as if it had been asking a question all night. Here, in this room, under this desk. You have a plan for her under the desk. There is a space between the drawer and the wall. It is 19 inches wide. She is small enough. She has been small enough for 11 months, and I have measured it every quarter. Zuri looked at the desk. She had sat on the other side of it 50 times and had never once thought of the space behind the drawer. He had thought of it every time. You measured. I measured. For her. For her. She released the desk. T. Hyun, say the name. He knew which name. He said it. Marchetti. The word left his mouth like a hinge unlocking. It was the first time he had spoken it, and Zuri felt the room take a half step to the left. Again, she said, Elias Marchetti. Once more. Elias Marchetti, priest of the North End, grandfather of the child in this house, dead 6 years and coming through a window tonight. Good. Why? Because I have carried it alone for 8 months and the weight is different now. He nodded. He looked at the bear. Han, he said, not loud. Han was already at the door. He had been at the door since Zuri sat down. He came in and stood 2 steps inside the room with his gloves folded once at the knuckle and his hands behind his back. Sir? Elias Marchetti, North End, above a closed bakery. He is there now. He will move tonight. 6 men, 3 vehicles, east service window. Han's expression did not change. His head tilted a 1/4 inch. Confirmed. Confirmed by the woman in this chair. Han's eyes moved to Zuri and stopped there for a beat that was longer than any beat he had given her in 8 months. It was not suspicion. It was the look of a soldier being told the map he had been drawing had a border he had not known about. Ma'am, Han, I have 3 questions. CO said, ask. Han asked the first. How many men on the ground floor of the bakery? Zuri said, I have not been to the bakery. He kept his soldiers out of the funerals I attended, but he never travels with fewer than 2. Han asked the second. How does he move Ari once he has her? By car to a private strip in Dutchess County. He owns a hangar there under a shell. The plane goes to a house on Long Island Sound that is registered to a widow in her 90s. I know the widow. She thinks she is renting to a Jesuit foundation. Han asked the third. Does he expect resistance? He expects the boss of this house to come to Boston to kill him. He does not expect the boss to be waiting in this room. Han absorbed the third answer for 1 full second. Then he said, good. CO said, doors. Han said, locked at 1900. Interior teams at 2100. Panic room active at 2200. East service window monitored on a delay so we do not spook the walk. Ari in the study at 2200. Mrs. Bennett in the master suite at 2200. Grace in the panic room with Mrs. Bennett. CO said, Grace stays with Ari. Han said, sir. CO said, Ari is in a room with 2 doors and a desk and a man with a gun. She will look for the tutor before she looks for me. If Grace is with me, Ari will sit. If Grace is with her mother, Ari will run. Han said, understood. CO said, Marisol. Han said, in the kitchen with a rolling pin and the pantry key. She has asked twice for knife. I have said no. CO said, say yes. Han said, sir. CO said, Jaiwoo. Han did not answer. He looked at the wall. CO said, where is Jaiwoo? Han said, on the west staircase, folding towels she folded yesterday. Co said, "Bring her here at 1700, to me." "Alone?" Han said, "Sir." Zuri had not moved. She said, "Jaiwoo cried in the pantry." Co said, "She did." Zuri said, "You said the leak is the man who does not cry." Co said, "I said that." Zuri said, "Then why bring her?" Co said, "Because the man who does not cry has been talking to her, and I would like to know what she has said back." Han opened the door and left. The door closed behind him with the soft click a heavy door makes when a man knows how to close a heavy door. Zuri and Co sat with the certificate between them. He had not closed the flap. She had not taken her hand from the edge of the desk. The koi in the fountain rolled its back out of the water once and slid down again. The clock on the wall clicked a minute forward. Co said, "Zuri." She looked up. "You should not have carried this alone." "I know. You should have told me 8 months ago." "I know. I am not angry. I did not think you were. But you should have told me." "I know." He put his other hand on the desk beside the first. Now both palms were down and both thumbs were a finger width from the edge of the envelope. "After tonight," he said. She waited. "There will be a conversation." About the bag under the west side of your bed." She held her breath at the specificity of the noun. West. He had said west. She thought she had been careful. She had not been careful enough. "After tonight," she said. "After tonight. Not before. Not before. Tonight I need you in a room with a door." "I will be there." "With her name in your mouth." "His. Hers. If she runs to me in a corridor with no door, you say her name once loud enough for a house to hear. Loud enough for a man on a stairwell to freeze. Loud enough that Han knows which floor. If you say his name, Marchetti thinks you are afraid. If you say hers, he knows he has already lost." Zuri felt the sentence sit down inside her ribs and take a chair. "Ari," she said, testing it. "Ari, Ari." He nodded. He took the certificate out of the envelope one more time. He looked at the priest's signature. He folded the paper in thirds along creases that had lived in it for 43 years. He put it in the inside pocket of his dress shirt over the koi. "Keep the envelope," he said. She took it. It was lighter than it had been 8 months ago. He stood. She stood. The bear on the poltrona kept its paw up, still asking. 6:38, he said, glancing at the platinum watch without lifting his wrist. "You will not be alone in the corridor between now and 2200. Han's men will move around you the way water moves around a stone. You will not see most of them. If you see one of them, that is the one I have told to be seen. All right. Eat something." "I will not." "Eat something anyway. Ari watches your plate." She almost smiled. She did not. He walked her to the door. Han was in the corridor. 2 men she had not seen before stood at the far end pretending to hang a painting she had watched hang there for 8 months. She noted them and did not look at them again. At the threshold she turned. "Taehyun, yes. If he does not come tonight, he will. If, then tomorrow I go to Boston. Either way, this ends this week." "All right." She stepped into the corridor. Han fell in a half step behind her without being told. She walked toward the east wing, with the empty envelope pressed against her ribs, the way she had walked with the full one an hour before. Behind her, the door to the study closed with the same soft click, and inside, Co Taehyun stood alone with the bear and the koi in his pocket, and the name spoken aloud for the first time in his life, and he set both palms flat on the desk, and he breathed once, and he did not sit. Down at the road, a delivery van completed its 4th pass, and this time it did not slow at all. In her own room 10 minutes later, Zuri set the empty envelope on the vanity and stared at her own hands until they stopped shaking. She had said it. She had said the name. She had put the paper across a desk, and the man on the other side had picked it up and folded it into his own shirt against a koi carp inked into his skin the year his brother died. Whatever happened after 2200, that would remain true. She had not run. The bag under the west side of the bed had not been touched. She sat on the edge of the mattress and pressed her palm flat over the place where the bag lay hidden, and she felt the ridge of the canvas through the wool blanket, and she almost laughed because Co had known about it since April, and she had thought she was clever, and he had let her have the illusion because the illusion was a kindness. Kindness had a shape. She had not recognized it until this morning. Grace knocked once and came in without waiting for an answer, carrying a tray. Toast, butter, a soft egg, 1 strawberry cut in half. She set the tray on the vanity beside the envelope and did not look at the envelope. "He told you to eat," Grace said. He did. Eat. Grace. I know what day it is. I have known since Wednesday. I am not going to say his name in your room because your room has ears you have not yet learned about, but I want you to know I know. Zuri looked at the older woman. Ari. Ari is drawing a fish in the kitchen. Marisol gave her a green pencil and a knife I do not want to think about. She is happy. She will be with him at 10. I will be with him at 10. You will be in this room with a door I have already checked. You will not be alone. You will be with her. I will be with her, and so will he. Zuri lifted the fork. She ate the strawberry first because it was the smallest thing she had lifted in 20 hours. Grace watched the fork land and left without saying anything else, closing the door with the same soft click that all the doors in this house had started to make, because everyone in the house had learned by now how a heavy door should be closed. Zuri finished the toast. She finished the egg. She did not touch the coffee. At 6:52, the clock on the mantel ticked past the hour, and somewhere below her, in a study with a bear and a koi and a name spoken aloud for the first time, Seo Hyun opened a drawer she had never seen him open and lifted out a shoulder holster older than his tattoo, and he put it on for the first time in 2 years. The mantel clock had barely finished its 7th chime when the delivery van made its 5th pass, this one slower than the 4th, and Han Do-yoon logged the plate on the tablet in his palm without moving his eyes from the road. He was in the security room off the kitchen. The tablet showed him the whole eastern approach in 6 squares of pale gray. 5 o'clock in the afternoon was still 9 hours away from the window latch that had been oiled in April, and Han knew, the way a man knows the weather before it breaks, that 9 hours was both too long and too short. At 7:15, he brought Jaiwoo up the service stairs. She held the folded towels against her chest like a shield made of cotton. She had debrato them again this morning, the same towels she had debrato yesterday, and both of them knew it. Han did not say her name in the corridor. He opened the study door and stepped aside. Seo was standing behind the desk with the shoulder holster on and the certificate folded 3 ways over the koi. The bear sat in the armchair. The bear had been in that chair since the night before, and Seo had not moved it, because he had not decided yet whether the bear went with Ari to the desk or stayed where Ari would see it when she came in. He looked at Jaiwoo for a long beat. Then he pulled out the chair opposite him. Sit. She sat. The towels stayed in her lap. I am not going to hurt you, he said in Korean. I need one name. She began to cry without sound. That was the first thing she did before he asked anything, and Seo watched her face and understood that she had been carrying the name for weeks and that it had been heavier than the towels. Kangwoo, she whispered. The gardener, the Wednesday shift. Seo held his mouth still. Han at the door breathed in once through his nose. He tells me he loves me, Jaiwoo said. He asks about the child. He asks small things, what she eats, where she sleeps, what color her dress is. I did not know why he asked. I did not know. He asked about her dress. Yes, the burgundy one on Miss Bennet too. She flinched, and the flinch was the answer. Seo took the folded certificate from over his tattoo and tapped it once on the desk, the way a man taps a card he is not going to play yet, and put it back. When does Kangwoo come today? 9. He comes at 9 for the roses on the south wall. He will not come at 9, Seo said. You will call him and tell him you are sick. You will tell him you cannot see him tonight. You will use the voice you use when you are lying to a man about your body. Do you understand? Yes. Han will stand next to you while you call. She nodded. The towels finally slipped off her lap. Han caught them before they hit the floor and set them on the desk with the same care he would use for a rifle. Jaiwoo. Seo waited until she looked at him. Your mother in Busan. Han will send her 2 years of your salary this afternoon. She will not know why. You will not go back to Busan tonight or tomorrow or next week. You will stay in this house until I say you may leave, because if you leave now, the men who own Kangwoo will find you before your plane lands. Do you understand? Yes. Fold the towels again, Seo said, softer. Fold them in the linen closet on the 2nd floor. Do not answer the door. Keep every window shut. If a man you have never seen walks past you tonight, hold your voice inside your teeth. A scream is what he wants. Walk into the nearest room and close the door. Han will find you. She stood. She took the towels. At the doorway she turned. The gun on your shoulder, she said in English suddenly, small, please do not miss. I do not miss, Seo said. The door closed. Han waited 3 full seconds. Kangwoo has been on the grounds 9 months. I know. He planted the winter cabbage in October. I know that too. Han held the next question inside his mouth because he had worked for CO long enough to know that the question, "Why did you let him?" did not have an answer that would help either of them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He simply picked up the tablet and left. At 8:30 in the morning, CO went to the kitchen. Ari was sitting on the counter with her legs crossed and a green pencil between her teeth. The page she had drawn was 3 sheets long now, taped end to end, curling off the marble like a river. Marisol was cutting apples into slivers thin enough to see light through. The knife was new. It sat close to her right hand, and Ari kept her eyes on the pencil. "Papai," Ari said. She kept the pencil in her teeth. "Do koi have knees?" "No. Then how do they kneel to say sorry?" "They do not say sorry," CO said. "They swim away and come back the next day and pretend nothing happened. That is how fish apologize." Ari considered this. She took the pencil out. Bad system, very bad. She reached for him without ceremony, and he lifted her off the counter with one arm, the colder shifting under the black cotton, and she wrapped her legs around his hip and pointed at the paper river. "That one is you," she said. "The one with the mad face." "Which one is Mammy?" "The one behind you, because she watches." "Which one is you?" "I am the pencil," Ari said. "I am not in the water, I am drawing it." He set her down. She went back to the counter, and Marisol handed her an apple sliver without a word. And CO left the kitchen with the taste of something metal at the back of his tongue. Because a child who understood that she was drawing the river was a child too old for 5, and he was not sure when that had happened, or who had done it to her. At 11, Zuri came down. Sleep had refused her. Her blouse this morning was cream, not burgundy, high collar, sleeves buttoned to the wrist, because tonight she refused to be the woman Marchetti had named in an apartment above a bakery. She met CO in the hallway outside the study. "Kangwoo," she said. He nodded once. "Jaiwoo? Alive, useful. The rose on the south wall will stay on the bush today." She looked past him at the study door, and the door looked back the way a door looks when a man has stood behind it for a whole night. She said, "I want to see the panic room." Han showed her the panic room at 11:40. It was under the pantry, down a flight of poured concrete steps, behind a door that read like plaster on both sides. Inside, a cot, a chemical toilet, 4 bottles of water, a first aid kit still in its shrink wrap, a landline that did not go through the house PBX, and a small monitor tied to 2 cameras, the east corridor and the study door. 2 hours of battery, Han said. Then the monitor cuts. The landline still works. Who has the code? Me, him, you now. He wrote it on a card. He watched her memorize it and took the card back and burned it in the sink with a lighter he seemed to conjure out of his cuff. "If the door on this side opens from the inside before I say the word," Han said, "the man opening it is not me." "Understood. Keep your hand off the handle." "I understand." She climbed back to the pantry, and her thighs felt older than they had at breakfast. At 2 in the afternoon, Kangwoo did not come. At 2:15, he called Jaiwoo, and Jaiwoo told him she was sick with something she did not want to give him, and she coughed twice, and she asked him if he would bring soup on Friday, and he said yes with the small hesitation of a man deciding whether to trust a woman he did not love. Han, standing at her elbow, wrote one word on a piece of paper and held it up. Friday. Kangwoo said the word Friday back into the phone. He hung up. Han called the wire house in Busan at 2:21 and moved the money. At 7, the mansion locked its doors from the inside for the first time in 8 months. At 9, Ari had her bath. Grace read her 2 chapters of a book about a rabbit who lived in a teapot and 1 chapter of a book about a girl who found a door in a tree. And Ari fell asleep on the 3rd page of the 2nd book with her cheek on Grace's forearm, and her hand closed around empty air where the bear should have been. Grace lifted her, carried her down the hall, and walked past Ari's bedroom without pausing. She carried her to the study. CO held the door open. The desk was pushed 6 inches from the wall. Between the desk and the wainscoting, there was a space 19 polgadas wide, and inside that space there was a folded quilt, the bear, a small flashlight, and a bottle of water with a straw. Grace laid Ari on the quilt. Ari stayed asleep. The bear went under her arm without ceremony, and Grace tucked the flashlight into the crook of her elbow, and Ari sighed once in her sleep and turned toward the wall. "She will stay asleep unless someone shouts," Grace said. Then no one shouts. I will be under the desk with her. I know. Grace looked at him. She looked at the colder and the shirt and the koi and the certificate that made a small square shape over his heart under the cotton. Leave the door unlocked behind us. I will. If she runs, Grace said, she runs to you. She will not run to me. She thinks I am furniture. Understand that before it happens. I understand. At 10:10, Zuri walked into the master's suite and Han pulled the door shut behind her from the outside, and she heard the small mechanical sound of the lock catching. She kept her body off the bed. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed frame on the west side, over the go bag, over 8 months of a plan she was not going to use, and she waited. The house went quiet the way a house goes quiet only when the people inside it have agreed to be quiet. At 2:47 in the morning, the East Wing service window opened without a sound. The latch had been oiled in April and again in September, and the man who came through the frame first did not know how many months he was inheriting. He came through low and slow, and his boots held off the sill until his gloves had taken the weight of his body onto the interior molding. He was in black tactical gear with the balaclava rolled to his forehead. His eyes were pale green. On the inside of his left forearm, under the sleeve, there was a shamrock that was no longer bright. Vincent Callahan lifted his hand behind him, and 2 more came through. Then 2 more. Then the 6th, carrying the ram. They moved down the service hall in the formation of men who had rehearsed the floor plan on paper. They had inherited a floor plan 6 months old and did not know it. They had no idea the guards disfarcados de entrega had been standing in the pantry since 11, that Marisol had a knife on the cutting board and a second knife in the drawer under her right hand, that Jaiwoo was in the second-floor linen closet with a landline receiver already lifted off its cradle, that the master suite was locked from the outside, that the study door was unlocked, that the child they had come for was not in her bedroom. The first 2 men reached the child's bedroom door at 2:49 and 30 seconds. They breached it soft with a pick and stepped into the empty room, and one of them raised a finger to his ear and said the word empty into the throat mic. And by the time the word had traveled through the encrypted band, Han Du-yoon had already killed the man closest to the pantry with a knife across the carotid. The mansion did not scream. The mansion sighed. In the master suite, Zuri heard, through the floor, the low, wet cough of a man who had lost the use of his throat. She stood. She stayed away from the door. She moved toward the window, because the window looked down onto the service hall roof, and if the fight was going the wrong way, the window was the mother of a plan she had never rehearsed and was not going to rehearse now. In the study, Ari opened her eyes. Grace was under the desk with her, her back against the interior panel, one hand on Ari's shoulder blade, the other flat on the floorboards. Ari sat up. She was very quiet. She had been dreaming of a river with a mad face in it, and now the river was in the walls of the house, moving. Papai, she said. SHH. Where is Papai? Papai is in the room. Papai is by the door. Papai told you to stay under. Papai told me, Ari agreed, and then, in the small, logical voice of a child who has decided something, Papai told me to stay under with the bear. She reached for the bear. The bear was there. She lifted it against her chest. I am under with the bear, she said. Good girl. Mammy. Grace's hand tightened on the child's shoulder. Mammy is safe. Mammy is upstairs. Mammy asked me to sit with you. Ari thought about this. Grace could feel the thinking through the small ribs. The second door of the service hall opened on the mezzanine level. 2 of Callahan's men went up. One of them made it to the top step. The other lost his footing on the 9th. Han was there with a suppressed pistol that made a sound like a book closing twice, and then went back to being nothing at all in his gloved hand. The first shot heard through the study wall was not Han's. It was Vincent Callahan's, in the ground floor corridor, into the shoulder of a guard who had come around the corner without checking the mirror mounted at head height above the sconce. The guard fell. Callahan stepped over him and kept moving. He was walking toward the study now because empty had been the wrong word on the throat mic, and empty in a house like this meant one place, and Vincent Callahan had been paid enough to read a floor plan by inference. Under the desk, Ari heard the shot. She heard it the way a 5-year-old hears something new, not as a sound, as a shape. It made a shape in the room outside the study, and the shape was the shape of her father not answering her when she had said his name. Mammy, she said, louder. SHH, sweet girl, SHH, we stay under. Mammy is not here. Mammy is upstairs. Mammy is not answering. Grace held her tighter, and Ari did the thing a 5-year-old does when she has decided the person holding her is furniture. She slipped. Ari slipped out from under Grace's arm the way water slips out from under a hand, and she took the bear with her, and she was out from under the desk before Grace's mouth had finished forming the word no. The study door stood unlocked. Ari opened it with 2 hands, the way she had been taught to open doors heavier than her. The marble corridor outside the study was empty for the first 4 paces. Then it was not. Down the hall, at the far end, where the corridor bent toward the east wing, a man in black stood with his back to her, a rifle in his hands, a shamrock she could not see. He had not heard the door. The hinges had been oiled too. Ari held the scream behind her teeth. She had been told to hold it there. She had been told that a scream was what the man wanted. She turned the other way. She turned toward her father's study, but she was already in the corridor now, and the study door was behind her, and the study door was closing on Grace's outstretched hand because Grace, on all 4s, had lunged for her ankle and missed by 3 inches. Ari ran. She ran barefoot down the marble with the bear against her chest and her space buns bouncing, and she ran away from her mother's wing, and she ran toward the sound she recognized, which was the small, dry click of her papai standing up somewhere she could not see. Upstairs, Zuri had her palm flat on the master suite door. She heard the small, fast slap of 5-year-old feet on marble. It was not coming from the east wing. It rose from below her in the south corridor, moving toward the study. Her mouth opened. Sio's instruction from the morning came back into her body like a hand on the back of her neck. Hold the name Marchetti inside your throat. Push out the name Ari. She shouted it. Ari. The name traveled down through the floor and along the marble, and it reached the child in mid-stride, and Ari heard it and kept running, because her mother's voice from behind a door was the safest thing in the house, and safe was the wrong direction tonight. Vincent Callahan heard it too. He stood 3 doors from the study when the child's name came out of the ceiling. He stopped. He turned. He saw, at the corner of the corridor, a small figure in a nightgown with a bear against its chest, running away from him. He lifted the rifle. The study door on the other end of the corridor opened. Sio Tihayan stepped through it with the collar unbuckled, and the pistol in his right hand and the certificate a small hard square over the koi, and he saw his daughter running toward him and behind her, 40 feet back, a man in black raising a barrel. The 2 men fired at the same second. Callahan's shot went high because he had adjusted for a running adult and he had a running child. It took the plaster over Sio's left shoulder, 6 inches from the koi, in exactly the place the 2-year-old scar under his shirt lived. Sio's shot went nowhere because at the moment his finger began to press, Ari reached him. She reached him at a full run and she kept her speed all the way in, and her small body hit his left leg the way a wave hits a piling, and she wrapped both arms around his thigh above the knee, and the bear was crushed between her cheek and the black wool of his trousers, and she said into the fabric, "Papai." The gun in his hand went down. It stayed in his fist. His arm simply lowered, the way an arm lowers when the body has understood, before the mind has, that the thing it was going to shoot has become impossible to shoot around. At the far end of the corridor, Vincent Callahan lowered his own rifle by 1 inch, because he had watched the child's arms close around the man's leg, and he had been in enough houses to know that a shot through a father in that posture was going to go through a child too, and he needed the child intact. He took 1 step forward. Han Du-yoon stepped out of the doorway behind him and put the muzzle of the suppressed pistol against the base of Vincent Callahan's skull, exactly where the balaclava was rolled up, and he held his finger flat along the frame because Sio had yet to give him the word, and Han was a man who waited for words. Under Sio's hand, the small, warm skull of his daughter pressed against his thigh. Her ribs moved fast under his palm. The bear breathed with her. "Papai," Ari said again, into the wool. "The bad shape is here." Sio Tihayan looked down at the top of her head, at the 2 loosening buns and the pale part between them, and he understood, with the clarity of a man who has finally been asked a question in a language he has spoken all his life, that the gun in his hand had gone down for the first time in 27 years, and it had gone down because a 5-year-old had reached his leg before a bullet had reached her back. And that this, whatever came next in the corridor, was the shape of a life he had refused to name. Behind him, in the study doorway, Grace was on her knees with both hands over her mouth. Above him, through the ceiling, Zuri was sliding down the master's suite door with her fingernails scoring the paint. 40 feet down the marble, Vincent Callahan felt cold metal against his skull and made the small internal calculation of a man who had been in this position twice before and lived once. The certificate over Sio's heart pressed against Ari's ear through 2 layers of cotton. He did not lift her yet. He did not kneel yet. He stood, with the pistol at his thigh and the child around his leg, and for the first time in the 8 months she had lived in his house, he let his left hand, the empty one, the one that had never touched her without a reason, come to rest, open, on the crown of her head. The mansion held its breath. Cot Hyun spoke one word into the hallway, and it was the smallest word he had ever used in that house. Now! Han pulled the trigger. The suppressed round went in at the base of Vincent Callahan's skull, exactly where the balaclava rolled up over the occipital bone, and the mercenary dropped straight down like a coat sliding off a hook. The rifle clattered onto the marble. The shamrock on the inside of his forearm slapped against the floor face up, a green joke in a dark corridor. Han stepped over the body the way a man steps over a spilled drink, already scanning for the last 2. Ari did not turn to look at the sound. She kept her face pressed into the black fabric above Sio's knee, both small arms locked around his thigh, the bear crushed sideways between her chest and his leg. Her breathing had changed. Faster. The wet catch at the top of each inhale that Grace knew from 3 months of asthma winters. Sio felt it through the trousers. He crouched, not all the way. One knee bent, the other braced, the pistol still in his right hand but pointed now at the floor, muzzle to marble. His left hand, the empty one, the one that had spent 8 months learning not to touch her, slid down the back of her head to the nape of her neck and stayed there, warm and open, a bracket instead of a caress. Small breaths, he said in English. In, out, with Papai. Ari nodded against his thigh. She did not lift her face. Han's voice came low from the far end. 2 more, west stair, moving up. Sio did not answer him with words. He tilted his head toward Grace, who was still on her knees in the study doorway with both hands over her mouth. Grace understood. She rose without a sound, crossed the 6 feet between them on the balls of her feet, and reached for Ari from behind. Her hand closed around Ari's shoulder. Ari clenched harder. Arya, Sio said, very soft. His voice on her Korean nickname sounded like a hand under a bird. Go with Miss Grace. Just to the desk. I will be there in 1 minute. You said 1 minute before, Ari said into his leg. You said it, and then the loud shape came. Sio closed his eyes for exactly the length of one breath. This time, he said, 1 minute is 1 minute. Papai does not lie about time. She let go. Grace lifted her, 60 pounds of shaking child and a bear that had lost one ear to the marble, and carried her through the study door. The door did not close all the way. Sio watched the strip of light on the floor narrow to 2 inches and stop. Grace knew better than to trust a closed door tonight. He stood. The room turned around him. Han, he said in Korean. The west stair. Go. Han was already moving. Sio followed 3 steps behind, the pistol coming up smooth from his thigh into the 2-hand grip he had not used in 26 months. The old shoulder holster pulled at the healed hole in his shoulder the way it always had, familiar as a bad tooth. He crossed the corridor at a fast walk. The mansion had gone silent again, not the silence of before, when the house was pretending nothing was happening, but the silence of after, when everything already had. The west stair was carpeted in dark red. 2 men in tactical black were on the landing, one high, one low, and they had heard the shot on the ground floor because the low one was turned wrong, half toward the noise, half toward the stair, caught between the training that said keep moving and the training that said find the sound. Han shot the high one first. Center of the plate carrier, no penetration, but the impact staggered him back against the banister. The low one fired twice, wild, at where he thought Han was. Han was not there. Han was already at the base of the stair, and his second shot went into the low one's neck above the collar. The man went down onto the 3rd step with the kind of weight that only bodies have. The high one, still on his feet against the banister, brought his weapon back up. Sio shot him twice in the head from the corridor. The sound was enormous. The chandelier 3 rooms away trembled. Somewhere in the west wing, a window pane cracked from the pressure of nothing. 6. 6 down. Han did the count on his fingers with his offhand, silent, the way they used to do it in loading bays. He raised his eyebrows the smallest amount. Co nodded once. Han took the stair 2 at a time to sweep the second floor. Co did not follow. Co turned and walked back the way he had come, past Callahan's body, past the shamrock, past the exact patch of wall 6 inches above his own left shoulder, where the bullet had gone into plaster. He stopped at that patch. 2 years ago, the bullet had been 3 inches lower, and it had gone into him instead. He had been 32 years old, and his shirt had been white, and Ari had been 3, sitting on the floor of a Boston pediatric orthopedic clinic with a wet pink cast, and a bear with both ears still attached. Zuri had been at the front desk arguing about insurance codes. The man with the gun had come in for the child, not the man, and Co had put his body between them because there was no time to think, and because there had not, in his 32 years, been anything in the world worth stepping in front of a bullet for until that specific afternoon. For 2 years he had told himself the bullet had been reflex, trained instinct. Standing now with the ghost of that same bullet 6 inches above his shoulder, Co let the lie go. He had chosen. In that clinic hallway, in the half-second between the door opening and the muzzle rising, he had chosen a 5-year-old he was not going to survive fathering. He had chosen her anyway. He had become her papai in that half-second. Not in the courthouse 8 months later. Not in the courtyard where he crossed each morning. Not in the dinner where she climbed into his lap. In that clinic hallway, 2 years ago. He had just spent 2 years pretending he could take it back. His right hand loosened around the pistol grip. He set the safety. He slid the weapon into the old shoulder holster and let his arm hang. He walked back to the study. Grace sat on the Persian rug beside the desk, back against the walnut panel. Ari was tucked in the 19-inch space, knees drawn up, bare against her stomach, both hands on its ears, one of which was gone. The lantern had rolled onto its side and lit the underside of the drawer in a yellow half-moon. Co stopped in the doorway. He looked at Grace. Grace looked back at him for a full second, then got up without a word and walked past him into the corridor and pulled the door shut behind her. Ari's head was against her knees. She had not looked up. Co crossed the rug. Every step made a small sound on the wood beyond the rug's edge. The kind of sound the whole house had been listening for 8 months, without knowing it. He stopped at the edge of the desk. He put the pistol, still in its holster, on the seat of the leather chair, out of a child's line of sight. He set his platinum watch beside it. He took off the shoulder rig entirely and hung it over the chair back the way a man hangs a coat after coming home. Then he went down onto his knees on the Persian rug, and he crawled the last 3 feet to the desk on his hands and knees, the way a man goes under a low doorway, and he came in beside her under the walnut. The space was tight. His shoulders touched wood on both sides. The old bullet hole complained. He ignored it. Ari's face was in her knees. Aria, she did not lift her head. Papai is here. 1 minute is 1 minute. Her small back moved once, twice, a hiccup that was not crying. The bad shape is gone, he said. Papai and Uncle Han made it gone. It will not come back tonight. You said. Muffled into her knees, I said. Say it again. It will not come back tonight. She lifted her face. Her eyes were dry. 5-year-old eyes, huge and dark and awake in a way that no 5-year-old's eyes should be at 3 in the morning under a desk in a house that had just been shot. She looked at his face and she looked at his neck, and her gaze fixed on the koi tattoo on the left side, where it disappeared under the collar of the shirt he had put on at 7 that morning to face the day he had known was coming. She reached up with her small hand. She touched the koi with one finger at the top, just below his jaw. He held very still. The fish is scared, she said. No, he said. Yes, she said. It's shaking. He did not know it was shaking. His pulse in his throat, right under her finger, was doing something he had no name for. She had a name for it. She always had. Something behind his sternum, in the exact place where he had spent 8 months building a wall out of Korean grammar and courtyards and averted glances, gave. It did not break. It gave. The way ice gives on a river when the season turns. A single tear moved out of his right eye. He did not raise a hand to stop it. He did not turn his face away from her. It went down the side of his nose and along the line of his jaw, and it did what tears do. It found the lowest path, and the lowest path was the koi tattoo on the left side of his neck, where her finger was still resting, and it slid onto the black ink at the top of the carp's head. Ari watched it go. She did not gasp. She did not smile. Her face did the small, serious thing that 5-year-old faces do when they are being handed something they have understood is important. She put both of her hands, then, on either side of his face. Her palms were warm. The right one still smelled faintly of green pencil from the kitchen 20 hours ago. She leaned forward on her knees under the desk, and she put her forehead against his forehead the way she had put her cheek against his neck in the morning of what already felt like another life. "Now Cora, papai," she whispered, in Portuguese, the language she used for the words that mattered most, the one her mother had used for her from the day she was born. "Eu tô aqui. Do not cry, papai, I am here." Something in Co Tihayan that had been held closed for 34 years and 8 months opened. He made no sound. Not tonight, not while her breathing was still wet at the top, but he brought both hands up and cupped the back of her head, palms full of her curls, and for the first time in his life, since a boy of 7 watching men take his father, since a boy of 19 closing a coffin on his brother, since a man of 32 on a clinic floor, he let a second tear come, and a third, and he held a child while it happened. He did not lift her. The space was 19 inches and she was safe there, and he had learned tonight that safe was not the same as apart. He came to her instead. He pulled her small body against his chest and sat back against the inside wall of the desk with her curled into him, the bear pressed between them, his chin over the top of her head. The study door opened. Zuri was in the doorway. Han had unlocked the master suite at some point in the corridor's long silence. She had come down barefoot, in the pale robe she had worn to the study yesterday morning, her braids loose against her shoulders. Her face was the color of a person who had spent 40 minutes with her back against a locked door and her fingernails in the paint. She had not run to the study. She had walked. Zuri Bennett walked to the things that mattered most. She saw the shoulder holster on the chair back. She saw the platinum watch on the seat. She saw the koi tattoo, wet, above a black collar. She saw the 2 heads under the desk, forehead to forehead, and the small brown hand tangled into the black hair at the back of his skull. She did not speak. She crossed the Persian rug slowly. She stopped a foot short of the desk. She looked down at them. Then she gathered the pale robe under her knees, and she went down onto her knees on the rug beside the desk, and she folded her hands in her lap, and she waited. She did not reach in. She did not say her daughter's name. She did not say his. She had spent 8 months knowing the shape of this exact moment without knowing it, and now that it was here, she understood that her job was to hold the room while the 2 of them found each other under the desk of a man who had sworn he never would. Co felt her before he saw her. He opened his eyes over Ari's head. His mouth moved once without sound, around a word that Zuri could not read. She nodded anyway. He closed his eyes again. He kept his face in Ari's hair. Outside the study, Han's voice said one word in the far distance. In the kitchen, Marisol was already washing a knife under running water. In the second-floor linen closet, Jaiwoo held the landline receiver in her lap and did not lift it. She had heard the 2 shots and the silence after, and she understood the silence was a signal. Somewhere in the mansion, a grandfather clock struck 3. Co lifted his head from Ari's a half-inch, enough to look at her face. Her eyes were closed. Her cheek was on his collarbone. Her breathing at the top of each inhale had lost the wet catch. The bear was warm between them. "You are heavy," he said in English, very softly. He had never said such a small, foolish thing to another human being in his adult life. "You are heavier," Ari mumbled, without opening her eyes. Above the desk, on the other side of the wood, Zuri put one hand over her mouth. Her shoulders moved once. She did not make a sound. Co shifted. He came out from under the desk on his knees, one careful motion at a time, and he brought the child with him, not lifted like a package. Curled against his chest, one arm under her knees, one arm under her back. The way he had watched Zuri carry her out of 100 rooms for 8 months and told himself was a thing other people did. He stood, turned, and crossed to Zuri. He went down onto his knees beside her, still holding Ari. Zuri looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said the word he had been unable to say for 8 months. Neither of them said the name Marchetti. Neither of them said the word father. They looked at each other over the top of a small brown head and the missing ear of a bear, and they were, at last, in the same room. Zuri reached out with both hands. She did not take Ari from him. She put one hand on the child's back, over the mint-green cotton, and the other on Sio's forearm, the one with the faint old scars over the black sleeve. She kept both hands there. Sio lowered his forehead to hers. Zuri closed her eyes. They stayed like that on the rug, on their knees, holding a sleeping 5-year-old between them, until the window behind the desk began to gray. The blackout of the Hudson Valley night had a limit. The limit was 5:40 in October, and it came whether the house was ready or not. The first strip of gray showed under the study curtain. Down in Boston, 214 miles south, in a small apartment above a shuttered Italian bakery in the North End, Reverend Elias Marchetti was already dead. He had died between 4:15 and 4:40, sitting up in a wingback chair with the black rosary in his left hand, the cold espresso beside his right, the rimless glasses folded on the arm. Callahan's last timings sat on his lap, all hands accounted for. Move at 0247. Marchetti had circled the numbers. The heart went the way old hearts go, a small, clean surprise. The parish would call it heart failure. The medical examiner would not open the chest of an excommunicated priest with no next of kin. Han would receive one word by text from a man in Boston who had once accepted a favor from the CO syndicate. Done. He would delete the message and wait 3 hours to tell CO. Kangwoo, the Wednesday gardener, would drive up the county road at 11:40 in his own car and meet a black SUV at the last turn before the gate. Jai-woo would be released from the linen closet at noon by Grace and would ask only to see the CO family go to breakfast. Han would allow it. From 20 feet away, she would watch Zuri carry a sleeping 5-year-old past, with CO half a step behind, one hand at the small of Zuri's back. Jai-woo would put her forehead against the wallpaper and understand she had been kept. But that was later. For now, in the study, on the Persian rug, the first light of morning came in gray through the curtain, and it found 3 foreheads pressed together over a bear. It found a shoulder holster hung on the back of a leather chair. It found a stripe of wet ink where a tear had dried on the top of a koi tattoo. It found no gun in Co Hyun's hand. He did not open his eyes. He said, into Zuri's hair, in a voice that had lived 34 years without saying such a thing to anyone, "I'm sorry." Zuri did not ask what for, she knew. For 8 months, he said. For pretending, for the chair outside the door, for the courtyard. For every time I looked at her across a room instead of at her face. "I know," Zuri said. "I thought if they saw me love her, they would drown her first. I know. I was wrong." The words were plain, he did not decorate them. Zuri kept her forehead against his. "You were wrong," she said, not a rebuke, an echo. A thing she was letting him keep, the way you keep a stone somebody has finally handed you after years of pretending it was not in their pocket. "The bag under the bed," he said. "I know you knew. Since April. I know. I did not take it because I wanted you to know you could still go." Zuri's fingers tightened on his forearm. "And now," she said, "now the bag stays under the bed," he said, "as a scar, not a plan." Zuri opened her eyes. She looked at him. Her face did the small thing that grown faces do when a sentence they have carried for a long time is finally set down. "Yes," she said, "as a scar." Between them, Ari made the smallest sound a child makes in deep sleep, a soft syllable, half a word, half a breath. Neither of them looked down. They did not need to look. They could feel her chest rise and fall against both of theirs at the same time, a small metronome marking a new count. Outside the study, the mansion staff was beginning, quietly, to move. Marisol came out of the kitchen with a broom and swept the corridor herself. When she reached the small dark hole 6 inches above where the koi had been, she stopped. She would tell the day crew a nail had gone in wrong. By evening, the wall would be smooth again. Grace was in the linen room at the end of the east wing, folding a robe she had already folded twice. She looked up when Marisol passed. The 2 women exchanged a nod that carried the whole night in it. Nobody in that house, for the 11 years that would follow, ever said the word monster again in the presence of any member of the CO family. It was not a rule that was ever spoken. It did not need to be. Inside the study, Co Hyun kept his forehead against Zuri Bennett's. His left hand was open on the back of his daughter's head. His right hand held Zuri's fingers over his own forearm, over the faint old scars, above the black sleeve of a shirt with a wet stripe at the collar. He did not swear an oath. He did not say never again. He was 34 years old, and he had learned in one night that never was a word that cost too much, and that the honest word was tonight. He said in Korean into the small dark hair between them, "Tonight I am your father." Ari did not wake. She did not need to. Zuri answered for her. Zuri answered for the whole house. "Yes," Zuri said. "You are." The gray at the window turned pink. The koi on his neck, dry now, caught the first line of it and looked, for one honest second, like it was swimming toward the light. He held them both, and he stayed. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, K-Fam, have you ever pretended not to love someone because loving them out loud would put them in danger? Have you ever hidden a tear so a child wouldn't have to carry your fear? Mark my words, K-Fam, the softest hand in the room is sometimes the one that saves you. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about fatherhood, silent love, and hidden legacies, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.